Well, good morning to each and every one of our viewer and listener, and welcome to another edition of the program Addiction and Recovery. Well, it's a wonderful Thursday morning, a very cool Thursday morning, and also very overcast. So it looks like we can expect some rain anytime now. I know soon some places are already experiencing rain right now, but it's still another day, and we're here alive and kicking. So join me as we welcome the host of the program Addiction and Recovery, Mr. Ramjas Darkar. See you, Ram, to you soon.
I'm Jason, and thank you for having me on the program. And yes, the weather is beautiful outside for now. We've been having a lot of sun and so on, climate change, I suppose. And I want to join with you in welcoming all our listeners, both locally in Trinidad and Tobago and worldwide. I know that we have listeners all over the world now who have been able to access the program on the internet, and the program is now also being posted on YouTube and Facebook for anyone who is interested to look at it at in their own convenience, at their own time. And it can also be used as a resource for people who want to refer others, siblings, friends, who may have, who they may think have a problem or who need to get assistance, guidance with any problem relating to substance abuse. There are programs that have been recorded in packages, programs that will help you to identify whether you're an alcoholic or drug addict. Then there are programs that will tell you of the resources where they could be found in Trinidad and Tobago and worldwide. There's also information on how to select the best program to match your situation. There are some people who cannot go into a in-house program full time because of family commitments or their job requirements and all of that. And there are also programs on the different challenges one may have when it comes to dealing with their drug addiction problem. It is the whole purpose of these programs is to help our listening public, Jason, to develop insight. That is to understand the nature and role that drugs play in our lives, and to be able to recognize when we are crossing that invisible borderline from social and recreational drinking or drug use to compulsive and addictive use of any substance. And not only illicit substances, we have spoken about people who are addicted to prescription pills and so on. There's a prescription pill epidemic out there that largely a lot of people are silent about, you know, but it is causing havoc. I'm seeing that in my practice all the time. And over all the years I've been doing these programs, I've been doing these programs for the last 30 years on various media houses. One of the most difficult issues that relatives and social workers and people who are would like to get help for a relative or a friend or a member of their society or group or workforce and so on. The greatest difficulty is how to get these people to agree to go for help. Most relatives will sometimes throw up their hands in the air and say, look, I have given up. So I'm speaking to those people today. There's a whole question of tough love, and there's a lot of misconceptions about tough love. But those two words, tough and love, really, if you look at them, it is being tough with the person, but at the same time, because you love them, because you genuinely care for them, you're setting boundaries. And it takes me back to our own childhood, Jason. You remember in primary school and so on. Now I know there's all this talk about, you know, corporal punishment is something that should be discouraged. But I tell you something, there is a value in it. Huh? I'm not using this media to recommend it again, because yes, there have been so many instances of abuse, not only in school systems, but in the home as well. And just to focus on that a little bit, a lot of parents, they punish their children. When a child has done something wrong, they seek to punish them. And usually this happens when you, the parent, was punished as a child, because our parents were not aware of all this, the insidious nature of abuse, how it can happen. There's physical abuse, but there's also psychological and emotional abuse. And a lot of people in the good old days, because of their own frustrations, because of their own unhappy lifestyles, because of the indentureship and slavery and all of that, you know, they would not have been generally in a good place when it comes to disciplining their own children, because they as adults were beaten by their overseers and these slave drivers and all of that, and by their bosses and all of that. So they lived in a world that physical punishment and abuse was the order of the day, and it could have been passed on to their children. I remember some parents talking about putting children to kneel down and agree to, you know, in school, holding all your books in your hand, holding your hands out, standing up on the desk and being shamed in front of your peers. And I don't for a minute suggest those things. But I dare say, even as a society, we do have that as an available option. And what comes to mind, Jason, is remember for independence, we parade our soldiers and our police and all the paramilitary and all of that. Why do you think we do that? We remind the society, hey, if you all don't follow the rules that we have agreed to live by in this society, this is also an option. We have the police and we have the soldiers. You understand? So I think it is important that children also know, because not all children will respond the same way to moral suasion and talk and advice and all of those. Sometimes you have to have consequences, and this is what recovery and getting people into recovery is about. It is letting alcoholics and drug addicts know that there are consequences for behavior. And not only to let them know, because a lot of parents and friends, and we threaten, that if, spouses would threaten, especially wives would threaten their husband, if you continue to drink, if you come home and abuse me, I'm going to leave you. And what happens? They come back and they do it again, but you don't leave, you don't follow through, because you say this in a, when you're in a state of pain and hurt. But then you really don't want to separate, especially when you have a family and you have children and you want to keep your family together. So I have seen a lot of wives take physical abuse, emotional abuse, all kinds of abuse, and still try to stick with it. And I'm not saying that that is the correct thing either, because now I know, and I would like to say categorically in this program, and I usually say this very slowly, Jason, that no addict or alcoholic is going to stop using alcohol or drugs unless to continue to do so becomes more painful than stopping. What am I saying there? I'm saying that a person who has become socially dependent on alcohol and drugs to function, psychologically dependent on drugs to help them to cope with their life, to feel good about themselves, to deal with depression and anxiety. A person who has become dependent physically, in that they have to have it, otherwise their hands are shaking, they're starting to hallucinate, they start having blackouts and all of those things. Now, the average person who has never used drugs will not be able to really understand these things. And this is why generally the public has very little patience, and tolerance for people who have become addicted, because they can't understand how a sane, I mean, educated, sensible person who come from a very good family and background could be doing this to themselves and others. Little do they know. And this is what this program is about. It's about educating our public to let them know that, look, a person who has become really dependent on alcohol psychologically and physically and socially, it is very, very painful for that person to even think about stopping, because it is not it in my work with alcoholics and drug addicts, I have found some of the most beautiful, emotionally caring, lovely people, talented people who are alcoholics and drug addicts, Jason. It seems like the best of us become vulnerable to this thing, but it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When when they're not drinking, man, they're the best person. Beautiful, loving, caring parent, father, brother. But the minute they start drinking, they themselves can't predict what will happen. They become Dr. Jekyll, you know? And so this is why it is important that we understand the nature of addiction. Because when we are asking a person to give up drugs, we're literally asking them to stop living. Because if you look at, by the time you reach to that level of addiction, chronic addiction, that person has no friends who are sober, do not go to any activities that don't have alcohol. He's not going to Bhagwat and PTA meetings and all of those things. But River Lime and Fest Match and Wake, once there's alcohol, that's where he will go. His friends, so that to be able to stop drinking, he will have to give up all of those things. Besides, he alone know when he can't sleep in the night. You know, he suffers with insomnia. The only thing that could help him to sleep is alcohol. When he's feeling depressed, the only thing that could change his mood is alcohol or drugs. So this is why it is also called mood altering substances. You understand? However, as painful as it is, on his own or her own, most alcoholics and drug addicts will not be able to give up or stop using drugs. This is why it is important that they get help, and they get professional help. They get help from people who understand the nature of their condition. However, again, as I said, the only way they will stop is to continue to use has to become more painful. And that is the critical element here in this discussion. How do we make the continued use more painful? Well, the one way we can do that, Jason, is by allowing them to suffer the consequences of their behavior. So that when he come and vomit on the floor last night, you don't go and clean it up after him. Mother goes and clean it up. Wife goes hide and clean it up before other people know, covering for him because she loves him. But by doing that, what you are becoming is an enabler. And I want brothers, sisters, parents out there to listen to this program carefully and to see, all right, if you have a son or a brother or a husband or daughter who is an alcoholic or a drug addict, you need to pay attention that what have you been doing? How have you been contributing to that? What you could do different. And one of the things is you do not become an enabler. So you see, I see this daily in my practice. And yes, if I could profile this, a lot of times, most of the times, you'll find that the sons, the males, are more likely to become alcoholics and drug addicts. Although that is shifting now in our society, and men, boys, the male has a special relationship with their mothers. It's called the Oedipus complex. And you have a tendency, mothers tend to, to be able to cover for their sons. And this is why there's always a conflict between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law usually. There's very little conflict between daughter-in-law and father-in-law, Usually it's the mother-in-law. Because they are both competing for the love of this one male person. And so the mothers tend to be more likely to become enablers. While the father will take a very strong stance, and say, he will tell the son, look, if you continue to drink and behave like this, you will have to get out. The mother is going to join with the father or just not in agreement, but she's going to open the back door for him to come in the night when he come home drunk, and she will warn him, listen, I'm not going to let your father know, but if you continue like this, and she will continue. I'm not saying all mothers do this. I'm not putting mothers on an indictment, but I've seen it happen so many times that the alcoholic, he's so manipulative. He has been manipulating his mother and his parents sometimes, both fathers as well, from small. So he know how he can, you know, get around these people and have his own way. And he will use several methods. As children, we cry and make our parents feel sorry for us, and they respond. But even as adults, we still have that method. We will threaten at first, we will threaten the relationship, I will stop talking to you, or some people even threaten suicide as well when they can't have their own way. So parents and siblings and do-gooders and anyone who wants to help an alcoholic who lives together with them and all of that, you have to be careful that you're not becoming an enabler. Because when he go and take drugs from the pusher, and yes, the pusher wants to know he can't pay, and the pusher is going to probably exact a heavy price on him with physical violence or something like that. And parents run go, and pay the bill and take him off the hook. He gets locked up. They go and take his bail and pay the lawyers and get him off the hook. He's estranged. Wife can't take the beating anymore, and she leaves. And the parents go and they take the pundit and go to beg the wife to come back. Listen, I want parents and relatives listening to know that these crises can be used for the benefit. For instance, the wife who is estranged, if she really wants the relationship and she really loves her husband, she can use that estrangement, that separation, to negotiate, a deal with him that, look, I will come back only if you go and seek help for your drinking. And I've seen a lot of men do that. They come and yes, they stay sober, and they may in the beginning just do it because they want to get their wife back. For those guys who are stopped and charged for driving under the influence, they are tested with the breathalyzer and they are sent to the court. And the magistrate says, look, I'm going to adjourn this matter, but I'm giving you a chance to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And they come to, because the lawyers know from experience that if they go to Alcoholics Anonymous and they get the groups that they attend to give them accreditations for attending, they can provide proof of that look, Your Honor, they tell the magistrate, my client is now going to Alcoholics Anonymous. He recognized he had a problem with alcohol. And now look, he's doing, and he's staying sober. And judges generally respond to that by saying, okay, we are going to reprimand and discharge you. We are not going to send you to prison or charge you a heavy fine, especially when it's the first time. And so alcoholics respond to things like that so that siblings can do that, parents can do that. But I want to say that when you contract with the alcoholic or the drug addict, that look, if you before you say something, you need to consider very carefully whether you can follow through with that. Because if you tell your son, look, the next time you go and use drugs or you come home drunk, you cannot stay in this house, right? And he comes drunk again, and you renege on what you had decided. You know what's going to happen after that? He's not going to ever take you seriously. In fact, you have just made the situation worse. So do not promise things you can't carry through. However, if you do promise, if that is what you feel, then you need to stand by what you say. And a lot of parents I know, they have argued with me, but Mr. Dwarika, you are saying, I should leave him in the lockup, or I should put him out and do let him come back. He'll become a vagrant. Now he'll become worse. How I can't do that. Well, I'll tell you something. I want all the parents and siblings and do-gooders who are listening to this program to realize, if you don't do it now, that's where he's going to end up eventually, Jason. Once a person who has become addicted and dependent on drugs, whether it be alcohol or marijuana or cocaine, it never gets better with time. It only gets worse. It's a progressive illness. And it's an illness, it's not a bad habit at that stage. And, this morning in preparation for this program, I was thinking the only difference between a mentally ill person and a drunk person or a person high on drugs is that the drunk person, the addict, it is a temporary condition. Yes, he'll get sober when it wears off. But the mentally ill person will have to probably stay and take treatment for a long time before they recover, if they recover at all. So one is a temporary condition and one is a more permanent state. However, in social policy, there are some generally human beings, individual adults, are allowed to make decisions for themselves. But there's an exception. For mentally ill people, the people around them have to make the decisions. And for little children, the people around them have to make the decisions. And so too for the alcoholic, sometimes the relatives, the friends have to make a decision, especially when he's inebriated and drunk. And I have seen a lot of family members, the man comes home drunk and he's wrecking the place, breaking up the furniture and all of that because he is in a state of, he's temporarily insane. He's unaware of what he's really doing. He might even be in a state of blackout, where next day he will not even remember. In that state, you have to restrain him. And I'm saying to family members, that is an opportunity, although it might be a chaotic, but it's a time when you could call the police and have them arrest him, restrain him and take him in that, once you take him in that state to any mental facility, Ward 1 in San Fernando, Ward 8 in Port of Spain, or St. Anne's Hospital, any psychiatric unit, they will accept them because they could see visibly this man is out of his mind. And that could be the first step to getting help for them. Where the person, when they're sober, they're in denial, they don't even want to admit they have a problem. Well, that's one of the ways when they under the influence. I have known relatives who get 2, 3 strong brothers and sisters and even neighbors and tie him up, restrain him, throw him in the backseat and carry him up to St. Anne's. You understand? And that was the beginning of that person's sobriety because now they are in an institution. And I want to say to people who are in the helping profession, it becomes your responsibility as a social worker, counselor, psychiatric social worker, whatever you are. Once a person comes to you, it becomes your responsibility to help them to develop insight. That is to say, you help them to make the connection between their drinking, their drug use, and their problems that they are having. You teach them what is called consequential thinking, that once you to really be honest and see it is not the family or the friends or all of these that are causing the problem for you, but it is your drinking or drug use. So that, there are illnesses, Jason, where generally the people around, the family members, the brothers and sisters, the siblings, the loved ones, respond with love. Because when a person is sick, they need care and attention and love and all of that. However, where drug addiction is concerned, this is one illness, drug addiction, where care and concern kindness could literally kill the patient. And that's what I'm talking about. Where you think you're being kind, but you are really enabling this person to continue to be sick. And enabling can happen in several ways. Huh? It can happen in the workplace where you have a colleague, your friend, right, who is always late for work, but you clocking in his card. He late because he's drinking, Or sometimes he's not even coming to work. Or sometimes he comes on the job, he's drunk, and you tell him, boy, go and relax. I will cover for you. You understand? It happened with people who work in security, you know. He went out drinking, he can't come to take up his shift at 6 o'clock, and the other guy has to hold on, you know, and make a double shift sometimes because sometimes he too has a drinking problem, you understand? And they cover for each other. So there are so many ways that co-workers, colleagues, supervisors even. I know someone here living not too far from me. He's dead now, but he was such a favorite. When he's not drinking, he worked at the region at Carnegie County Council. In those days, it was County Council, and he was so well liked. And he was really a nice person, very helpful, very kind, and when he was sober, but he had a drinking problem. And sometimes for days and weeks, he will not go to work. But they also loved him. You know, he was a favorite, and he would get his pay. And when he get his pay, what you think? They were supporting his habit, and that is what would have contributed to his demise eventually. So when we covering up for someone, when we enabling them, we're not doing them a favor. We really helping them to continue to be sick. You understand? I know this old lady many years ago on this same program. An old lady from Rosilac had called the program, and she is a pensioner. And her young son, her only son, now her husband had died. They're living in the same house, and he, because of his addiction, was threatening this old lady and with physical violence, and she had to give him her pension money, and she couldn't afford to continue to pay her utilities or buy food, you know, and her medication and all of that. And this young man was just taking it and he was not wicked, you know. When he was sober, he loved his mother. She loved him. He was the only thing she had. But eventually she made up her mind and she took him to court and got a restraining order and get him put out of the house. And it was only then, with the police giving her support, this guy decided eventually to do something about his drinking. You understand? So going back to where we started, when the teachers, you know, spank us in school, it was not because they didn't like our head, you know, Jason. It's because they realized that's the one method that this hardened little boy would listen to. You understand? Because talking wasn't making the difference. We had to have something that acted as a catalyst to help. And so too with drug addiction, when a person has become so addicted to drug, they are willing to, to go and steal to support their habit. You know, women submit themselves to physical and sexual abuse to earn money to support their habit. It is as powerful as that. So if you're going to get them to turn away from that, you have to come up with a strategy that they would respond to. I have seen, and in this case, for instance, employers are in a strategic position. I have seen so many people who the wife threatened to leave them and actually left them, but that didn't help them to stop. Because now they were saying, boy, nobody there to nag me, you know, because they still had the resources to support their habit. You understand? But I tell you something, when the employer say, you go and do something about your drug addiction, otherwise I'm going to cut your lifeline. That means I'm going to take away your resources that you fund your drug addiction. Most people will react and respond to that. Now, not all. There are some people who are so addicted that, well, they have lost their job anyhow. They have no job now. They have no employer. And they're living one day at a time based on, you know, what they could provide for themselves. So the drug addict becomes very adept at making up stories, you know. And I have met so many people, they don't know who I am and that I do a program like this. I myself have met, you know, you're visiting one of the hospital, you meet a guy outside the gate there and telling you he has his hand in a sling, and you could see the sling is getting discolored. He have it on so long. He doesn't even realize that because he don't have a place to go wash it. And he's telling you, look, he's just discharged from the hospital and he has no money to go home. And nobody came for him. And these fellows will come up with stories that could make God cry, I think. They're so convincing because their very life they feel depend on this. So they come up with they call it prayers. Drug addicts call it prayers. When they say their prayers, even God will listen. They from the time they get up in the morning, their whole mind is obsessed, preoccupied with where they're going to get the next fix. So that alcoholics and drug addicts, not only while they're using the drugs, even when they're not using the drugs, they are preoccupied with where they're going to get the next drug, where the next fit, where the next meeting with my friends, even while you're working. I could relate to that because even in my days when I was drinking, yeah, I'd be doing my work, but I'm thinking, where are we meeting this evening? I'll already call a few friends who were some of them alcoholics like myself and say, where are we meeting this evening? You understand? So that is what the obsession is about. When the alcoholic is not drinking, he's thinking about drinking. When he's not using, he's thinking. And people in recovery will tell you only God could remove that obsession because it's a mind thing. However, the people around the alcoholic and drug addict can help in that process by not enabling the person to continue to be sick, not covering for them again. You understand? I was going to say confronting them because I know there have been programs where you confront the person, you get significant people who are significant others in that person's life, like their priest, a parent, a teacher, a member of the community, a very good close friend. And these people, you set up an arranged appointment where the person is sitting there with his group and they are all what they're doing is care fronting, I like to call it. They're letting him know that look, we love you, we care about you. But this is from where and he knows that these are people who really love him and care about him from their past relationship. And they tell him, look, not talking down to him, but letting him know that when you drink and you behave like this is how it affects us. It hurts me as a parent, hurts me as your brother. You understand? And these things have a certain level of success. I have known cases where children have spoken to parents. This little boy, I've heard his father in recovery saying, that his son came home from school one day and told the father how the children were treating him because of they had seen the father drunk and misbehaving, and how the teacher, the principal had asked him to come in and wanted to speak to him about it. And just based on that conversation with his child, he decided, you know what? I have to do something about my drinking. And yes, in that respect, children can also have that influence because people, no matter they are drug addicts, alcoholics, mothers and fathers, they love their children. They're not doing, they end up neglecting, you know, not providing sufficient, but it is not because for lack of love. It is because of the drive of their addiction and the nature of substance abuse addiction. So that I'm saying, in fact, just before this program, I was listening to, and I want to thank your staff in the back room there for providing these videos, to introduce this program, and very, very interesting and informative. And there's also the whole question now of internet addiction, where they are finding, in fact, in the United States, just reported that this company, Meta, that is handling Facebook and Instagram and so on, is being sued in several states because they are using algorithms and subliminal methods to get young people addicted. And I have found that that is something that is so infectious, for want of a better word, that even I recently, I've been paying attention to this, that you can easily be drawn into these, and I don't want to mention the name of the various social media at this point, but you can get drawn into these things, especially with the likes and all of that. People looking to see how many likes they have, how many followers they have. It gives you a sense of, importance. And that is ego inflating as well. And so I have spoken about this, even I and my wife, we have to sometimes remind ourselves that, we don't really get to talk to each other so much. Yet when we sit in the hammock now, I am on my phone and she's on her phone. And when we should be talking to each other. And that's something we have to be consciously aware of. And I see my grandchildren as well doing the same thing when they come to visit grandpa. They're still on their phone because they want to finish playing the game they had started. They want to win. And the net result of all of this is there is a drastic decrease in interaction between family members. And this, I would dare say, from my own training and knowledge, will have and is having an impact on relationship building because you can't. I mean, it's so bad, Jason. Sometimes people sitting across the table from you, and this one is texting that one across the table rather than talking to them. You understand? So we have to become consciously aware because these things are, or even the advertisements, they are designed by professionals, who know how to entrap the mind. It's just like simple. If you put a cat to watch man cheese, what do you think is going to happen? The cat is going to eat the cheese. You understand? So the developers of these platforms and these games and all of that know that, you know, it's called conditional thinking. And in a few minutes, let me just explain conditional thinking. I usually use a little mathematics to do this. In the old days, they used to make cigarettes in packs of 12. You wouldn't remember that, but that's since I was a little fella. You understand? So this guy had 3 packs of cigarette and he ended up on an island. He's a chain smoker and he ended up on an island alone, you know, with these 3 packs of cigarettes. Cut a long story short, what he did, of course, he smoked out the 3 packs. So he had 36 butts, cigarette butts. And then because he's a chain smoker and he's addicted to cigarettes, he can't do without it. He found that he could take 6 cigarette zoot, as we call them, or butts, and make 1 cigarette. So the question is how many cigarettes he will make with 36 butts. And normal mathematics would suggest 6, because 36 divided by 6 will give you 6. But conditional mathematics, a person who knows a drug addict and understand the nature of addiction will tell you that he will make 7. And you say, well, how? Well, I'll tell you how. Because after he makes the 6, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to smoke it. And he's going to end up with 6 butts again. And he'll take those 6 butts or zoots and make another one. Because that's the nature of addiction. And if people in the helping profession do not understand this is why we have been failing, because you have policymakers who don't know what is happening in the trenches and they are not given to talk to people who know. You understand? They sit in the ivory towers and come up with all kind of ideas thinking, well, look, we could legislate this problem away. No. Just the other day, we had all these big consultation on marijuana use and thought we could, come up with policies. And in spite of talking to some of these policymakers, the politics is so much. Politicians are not moved necessarily by what's good for the society. My experience has been they are moved by what will keep them in power. It doesn't matter how it affects the society. And when we look worldwide, you understand, Jason, you can see so obvious. Politicians don't care how many people get killed or die once they can continue to keep their popularity and keep themselves in power. You understand? I'm sorry to say, but this is where the world is heading. Of course, we will keep plodding on with our program and hope that people listen. We can only cause people to think, Jason. We can't really do it for them. And I hope that people listening to this program this morning can think. Of course, there are so many others more we can speak about this whole question of tough love. This program becomes very short when we get into these subjects. But anyone who has any further questions, you can reach me at 6713040, or you can call this station, Jason. You all can give them my number,
Yeah.
and I would be only happy to share whatever information with them. I have also said on this program, I have also made myself available to organizations that wish for me to speak to their workforce, their audiences, their temple groups, because this is a subject matter that most people are in denial about. They don't want to deal with it. Alcoholics and drug addicts don't come to these lectures. Their family members don't want to come either because it's like an admission. You understand? So it's most of the time you have to get a captive audience that you give the information to, and hopefully, because most of the people who are listening to this program are just not necessarily drug addicts or alcoholics, but someone who has been affected by it or know someone who has a drug addiction problem. So I thank all those people who listen and interact. I've been meeting a lot of these people every night at Diwali Nagar these days. A lot of people come up to me and says, Mr. Dwarikan, compliment me for the program. I want to say thanks to all of them for the encouragement. And I want to thank again the staff and the management of Jagriti, radio and TV Jagriti, for giving free airtime. This is very expensive airtime that is given as a public service to help our brothers and sisters out there who may have a problem with substance abuse and drug addiction. So anyone having a problem, they can call me. I'll be only happy to help in whatever way I can. I want to thank you again, Jason, for hosting the program this morning and giving me an opportunity to share with and to let the listeners know this program will be posted on YouTube under my name, Ramnaresh Dwarika, and so are all the other programs that I've been doing lately. So you can go into them and listen to it at your own time. Thank you again, Jason.
Yes, always a pleasure to have you on the show. And yes, the battle of addiction and the road to recovery is not an easy one, but the good news is you don't have to do it alone. So be sure and take that first step today. Until next Thursday, I'm Jason Kalu saying see you around for now.